Do what thou will be the whole piece of law.
Government whistleblowers. It's always hard to tell whether or not they're real or fake. There's usually a dichotomy of choice that you have. You can either believe that they're lying and that everything is as everyone tells you it is, or you can accept the uncomfortable truth that the corruption may run deeper than you ever thought it did, and just what you see may only be the surface of an iceberg. This isn't an iceberg video, don't go too far. You've just never heard about the corruption before. Usually when you see files come out, it's usually shocking, and the zeitgeist and public opinion tries to warp and modify itself around what it's hearing. We've seen this recently, but here I want to give you the story of two whistleblowers who are, in fact, connected. Their stories may sound completely alien and apart from each other, but if you follow the story to its terminus and follow all of the threads I will lay out for you, you'll find one of the most corrupt places in the United States is the one with the most money. Well, that makes a lot of sense, but I promise you it's interesting. So today is a double feature. Strap in, get a snack, like, comment, subscribe. No, but seriously, do those things before we start. And then settle in for the long haul. This will take a bit. The first story begins with our first whistleblower getting 32 years in prison. This was after the accused, a 44-year-old man by the name of Richard Taus, had a complaint filed against him by the FBI for inappropriate conduct with two minors, not the DRG kind, the child kind, that he had coached in a soccer team that he volunteered for, or it's a football team if you're wrong. The complaint charged him with the inappropriate contact, as well as the fact that he had threatened one of the victims to keep his silence. The FBI tried to interview both of the boys, but one of their therapists gave testimony that he was unfit to be interviewed. However, the therapist believed that he had suffered inappropriate contact, and another one was interviewed. This was enough to get Taus convicted of up to 90 possible years in prison. However, he only served 32. But that's the end of the story. Now, how did Taus get there in the first place, sitting in that Nassau County courtroom? Well, let's start earlier in his career. Taus is a Vietnam veteran, and in Vietnam, he came into contact with Air America. This is a known CIA operation in Vietnam. However, where this becomes a large allegedly, and this video is going to be built on allegedly, so please bear with me, he allegedly came into contact with the CIA moving about 4,000 pounds of illegal substances, which is a strong start for his whistleblower career, as a lot of this is coming from two articles in two different papers, and his book that he had wrote, which is in fact a series of two books, but that's splitting hairs at that point. He became the first Vietnam veteran to adopt a Vietnamese child that was orphaned by the war. This was after the war, by the way. This isn't a stunt he did during the war. He adopted a Vietnamese orphan child after the war, and he would get a personal visit from the president of Vietnam. He also took a spot at the FBI during this time in the 1970s, and he also coached this soccer team as a volunteer for over 9 years. He had an immaculate record with no recorded incidents or other misconduct. Now, at the FBI, this is obviously a job where he works very closely with the government, so we have to go off of what Taus claims, because most of these will not be corroborated, as he's a whistleblower. So if you want to take Taus at his word, go ahead, but I'm going to try and give him the most amount of plausible deniability so no one comes at me for saying what he said. So at the FBI, Taus claims that he investigated the Iran-Contra affair. If you want to know more about that, just watch the Family Guy clip. He investigated the Iraq USDA affair, also known as Iraqgate, where this one's lesser known, so I'll give you a bit of a spark notes. Iraq, during the time of the 1980s, was getting loans from the USDA to buy food. However, it was alleged, with little to no evidence, that Iraq was using this money to buy firearms, and frankly, it's a little too far back for us to even care. Nothing really came of it. I mean, look at the stats for the Iraq War. And the U.S. savings and loans debacle. By the way, the one you need to know is that this one cost the taxpayer $132 billion for mistakes that they didn't make, as well as more general mafia connections and terrorist action. He was also close to William Sullivan, who was close to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Now, William Sullivan is very odd because before his testimony in 1977, he would exit the U.S. Census in a very suspicious way before he would give testimony to the U.S. Governmental Panel on Assassinations.
want.
But that's a whole different story. Taus also claims that while he was volunteering as a soccer coach, he found a CIA K team leading back to Oliver North and possibly as high as Vice President George Bush. This is all a big allegedly, and in case you're wondering, I gotta make sure my personal health is not at risk. You know, I have no intent of anything. Now, the inciting incident that Taus claims for his arrest was not signing a form. Now, what's so important about this form? This form is signed biannually by every single FBI agent, certifying that they have no knowledge of criminal activity within any governmental institution that they oversee. This includes the CIA, FBI, or any other related institutions. This is then sent to the Senate Oversight Committee on the FBI as basically saying that their agents have reported everything that they've seen and they've investigated themselves and found nothing. However, Taus would not sign this form based on what he had seen and what he was investigating. His superiors told him to cease and desist. However, he wouldn't, and he began to send letters to the director of the FBI, William Sessions, as well as people on the Senate Oversight Committee, including people such as Chuck Schumer and Alphonse D'Amato, as well as anyone else on House Oversight Committees or Senate panels, but he claims that he was ignored at every turn. He then alleges that New York State, specifically Nassau County, engaged in a cover-up of his findings and went ahead with an arrest 2 weeks before Election Day. And let me be clear, Nassau County did not play nice in this trial. The DA of Nassau County, a man by the name of Dennis Dillon, got a relative into the juror box, which she did not declare. This is a conflict of interest, you would call it in the business.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Allegedly. All of the information in this segment is going to come from a journalist called Margie Sloan. Links will be in the description, by the way, for these two articles. Oh, as well as a transcription of the second whistleblower's letter. Margie Sloan will also allege, as she doesn't list her sources, that the lead prosecutor of this case, by the name of J. Kenneth Littman, was himself a predator and resigned following Taus's conviction, as well as the judge, Edward Baker, also resigning after the conviction of Taus. In addition to all of this, the leader of Nassau County's Department of Intimate Crimes, Lloyd Doppman, is alleged to have groomed the victims of Taus's crimes. Now, these alleged victims that Doppman may or may not have groomed, depending on who you wish to believe in this story, were from families who were broken, their parents had criminal charges, and these children couldn't read. They may have also been intimidated to sign statements that they had no knowledge of, as well as have their parents' criminal charges dismissed if their children were to sign documents brought forward for them, aka their witness statements that they would use in the FBI complaint against Taus. The jury is also, according to Margie Sloan, on record having lied under oath, which is specifically targeted at Nancy Dillon, the person who withheld their relation to Dennis Dillon, as well as admitting to lying under oath during voir dire, not even to mention the massive amount of well poisoning, including distribution of inflammatory flyers depicting Taus as a predator, or spreading prejudicial stories around his soccer team. This is also not to mention the massive amount of internal connections that the jurors have to people connected with this case. The foreman was a former air traffic controller who was fired by Reagan and hated the FBI, as well as Nancy Dillon also told how she was connected to Doppman via a personal connection in a karate class. If you want to look to what the defense had Taus's story, which was solid, and Sloan asserts that Taus had evidence. However, I can't find the court records for it, so we'll just have to go on her word. Aside from the misconduct charges, he was also charged with misuse of a government credit card. Now, I'm surprised he wasn't charged with more, because they usually just love to throw the book at people, but maybe he was just so clean that this was the only thing they could get him on. But regardless of that, Taus presented that during the time when the alleged assault would have occurred, he was at an annual Army Reserve training, as well as the misuse of a government credit card was not him blowing the entire thing on air fryers and then moving to China. It was $10 for gas when no government car was available when he was on an investigation. To conclude this story, He says that all Americans should be concerned about corruption in their government, and to some degree I agree, as we've seen in massive amounts of undeniable proof that corruption and abuse go a lot deeper than you see on the surface. So who are you most inclined to believe in this story? I won't force you to decide now. I want to move on to the second whistleblower. The second whistleblower is a man by the name of Francis E. Deck, a former lawyer, as he was disbarred, for Nassau County, who has done nothing but write letters trying to expose the grand conspiracy that had taken root in Nassau County. He lost everything in a case that involved a $400 auto insurance claim from the Allstate Insurance Company, in which, as previously mentioned, he was disbarred for. And if you don't think this summary is good enough, I actually did a video covering the entire trial, and you can watch it up there. However, he would continue to blow the whistle all the way up to the governor's office, trying to indict Mario Cuomo on corruption charges. And the thing that makes this special is we actually have a key piece of evidence, a letter passed down through the ages. So I will take the time to read it in full, as I think it sums up his complaints quite rationally, in an unbiased manner, succinctly, and in the most even-handed way possible. So, the whistleblower letter goes, quote, "Even completely disguised as a woman during town's busy nights, even amongst many other to be burned alive, Frankenstein, Radiohead, deadly gangster cops zoom up on the sidewalks, even private property with their unmarked cars and plain clothes, all based upon my Frankenstein Brain Thoughts broadcasting radio. The cops, as deadly gangster computer god controlled, gangster government Frankenstein earphone radio instructed parroting puppet eyesight TV cameras search you out and pick you out, even in a crowd, forcing me into my deadly weeded abandoned yards, stumbling, repeated fence jumping, mailboxes, deadly night runs. Since Mario Cuomo, Ginny Gangster, is governor, the gangsterism against me has multiplied, even drugged in a few seconds of Frankenstein earphone radio deadly warnings, refuse my quote-unquote big money for tiny jobs for me, such as even $15 plus cab fare to go shopping for me. I pay as much as $35 to have my lawn mowed with my power mower. At most a 2-hour job. No landscaper will even answer my request to name a price in my post-paid envelopes. Computer god redlining. The quiet work of raking leaves and trimming my tall hedges with my cordless electric hedge trimmer I do very late at night, piecemeal, in order to stay alive. My gigantic wholesale food orders are delivered even many weeks late in spite of mail inquiries. To keep alive, I ration whatever stored food I have. Lifelong Ginny gangsters testify during the computer god federal court civil trial in Westbury, Long Island, New York, that Nassau County was a complete organized crime gangster mafia government. One of said Ginny gangsters in sworn testimony admitted lifelong felon gangsterism was New York State U.S. Senator Alphonse D'Amato, who for many years was the young town of Hempstead supervisor. In sworn testimony, he admitted he took part in the Nassau gangsterism, and from computerized receipts studied and knew the exact money bribes, etc. each week. As soon as Alphonse D'Amato was fixed as U.S. Senator, Mafia Ginny Sicilian Frank Gulata make a defix and put his gangster kid Thomas Gulata into the town of Hempstead supervisor position. No doubt the gangster Ginny kid Thomas Gulata already has trunks of felonious money as untouchable cover-up gangsters. The county judiciary, besides being in the majority, disease, has many Ginny gangsters too. One such Ginny gangster judge is Albert Apito, a real lowly runt greaseball Ginny, for his repeated screaming, "Give him nothing, kill him, give him nothing," and his wide-open, untouchable computer god planned purloining of my court records in conspiracy with the CIA gangsters and lowly gangster court clerks. Solely the computer god repeatedly made him judge and finally Supreme Court judge in Nassau County, solely for his crimes against me. About the same time, I was being dragged in handcuffs for his crimes against me. For a few years before his computer god repeated judge promotions, Albert Apito was a young number Hempstead town town councilman, an absolutely do-nothing but gangster fixes title with twice the weekly pay of a cop. The computer god, in order to fabricate a lawyer's background for this lowly moronic Ginny, the computer god overseered Albert Opito's buying and making an old house up the street from the courthouse's complex, and then converting it into his law office. His secretary, Ruthie, a young who gave me lifts from the courts and even to serve my summons, repeatedly confided secrets about this moronic runt Ginny gangster Albert Apito. She even boasted, I make him suck my just for his ugly, runty, stupid school teacher wife, and I make more money than she, just for letting Albert Apito suck my all day in his newly opened law office with no real clients, only felonious fabricated large insurance company injury claims of non-existent auto accident injuries, bribes, make a sure fix, Albert Apito, the usual cowardly, deadly, dangerous, lowly Ginny, like all Ginnies worldwide, does suck the Ginny god of sodomy and Gomorrah. Double parentheses. Do you remember the defunct original $25 for full life subscription, Life magazine, many-page artificial, confirming Mr. Francis E. Deck's above statement of facts, and double parenthesis. More of the few Ginny gangsters above mentioned were wide open feloniously implicated in the computer god's staged civil trial in federal court in Westbury, Long Island, New York, above mentioned. Even deposed runt Ginny gangster Ralph Queso on the witness chair testified, I don't you know nothing. I just see everybody's in Nassau County government swindling and being a real mafia gangsterism. I, Ralph Queso, was the county executive, end quote. It is all pure. It is the same throughout United States. Empty courtrooms, year in and year out, except for a few computer god well-publicized and obviously poorly staged fixed trials with lifelong real deadly gangsters, usually very wealthy, to be absolved publicly, such as DeLorean or Count Von Bulow or even Gibson, mayor in New Jersey. Even you Frankenstein earphone radio parroting puppet gangster slave know it is all pure. Ginny gangster Mario Cuomo has appointed his buddy since schooling days, Ginny Vito, a Court of Appeals judge, highest court. Mario Cuomo has fixed his gangster kid, Alex, as a lawyero in the Attorney General's office. Ginny gangster Mario Cuomo says, that's a no conflict of interest, that's a sure fix. Must be something in my head. I don't know why my voice does that now. That's so weird. Anyway, you may be able to guess that the history of this man is a little more complex than I can do in just that little paragraph trying to sum up who he is. So if you want the entire context of what this letter is, you can watch it up there. But did you guess how these two are connected? That's right. Nassau County is a bunch of corrupt criminal gangsters, allegedly. As I looked for this video, I tried to find instances of Nassau County corruption, and all I found was the same names all the way down. It seems that Nassau County wants to do the same thing that all federal agencies want to do when one of them gets caught and they have to have someone take the blame for something. They put someone up as a sacrificial lamb, and everyone else rallies behind them as witnesses in the claim. As when I begin to look, there's a lot. And as for Francis's previous letters, I feel that I've been discounting the corruption a little too much. He was the hero we needed. I just couldn't see it. And now I feel that his claims of corruption in Nassau County are more credible, but maybe weren't as blatant as he says they are. I don't think it is someone gets up on the stand and says, yes, I am definitely involved in all this criminal gangsterism going around. But seeing Nassau's history of people like Skelos getting convicted for money laundering and a bunch of other things, and then you have people that Francis mentions like Alphonse D'Amato getting up and saying, yes, of course, this man was always doing this and no one was brave enough to come up and say, but now that we've all had the opportunity to come up and say it at once, I am also going to get up and say it too. It's the people who didn't actually stab Caesar dipping their knives in the blood and saying, yes, we did this too. I feel Francis had the opportunity to observe this corruption because he was in the circles of lawyers or just in the legal sphere, and he was able to observe the county so closely that he may have picked up on things that were actually happening, especially because if you are a true Francis head, you do know that Dennis Dillon was referenced in a previous rant, and yes, that flashbanged me as much as it did you. In conclusion, Nassau County is a massive county of nepotism, greed, money, and flat-out gangsterism, allegedly. One of my favorite words, the all-consuming shield. It's probably one of the worst spots in the country for corruption outside of DC, because everyone knows that DC has its oily tentacles and everything. And I would like to officially thank you for watching if you made it all the way through. Please like, comment, and subscribe. This took me a while to make, and I hope you appreciate the scripting. If you did, please leave a nice sandwich of criticism, leave your 2 positive things and then put your 1 piece of critical criticism in the middle. I really do appreciate it more than anything else, as I'm looking to improve. But, as someone who has never taken part in nepotistic corruption before, I'm going to take Mario Cuomo's advice. If you ever did want to put your relative in a place of power that you or someone you may know is involved with, just remember to repeat to yourself, that's a no conflict of interest, that's a sure fix.